War does not begin with gunfire, it begins when hope is taken away. In the frozen heart of Nazi Germany, where steel cages replace freedom, young soldiers are reduced to numbers, prisoners waiting to be forgotten by history. But inside one captured tank, there is something the enemy never expected: defiance. This is not just a story about war. This is a story about men who refused to kneel, about courage forged under torture, and about a machine named T34 that became a symbol of rebellion. When escape means certain death, and obedience means losing your soul, one crew makes a choice that will echo across the battlefield. Tonight, on ESKC Movie 111, witness a brutal, emotional, and unforgettable war story, where survival is earned with blood, and freedom comes at the highest price. This is T34, 2018. One night, Nikolai Ivushkin met the general, who appeared to be severely wounded from the brutal battle. The general sent Nikolai to lead the remaining tank troops. They were instructed that they were the last line of defense. The general instructed the soldiers to obey Nikolai's orders as their leader. Then he left them. The soldiers asked Nikolai what their current duties were. Nikolai replied that the Germans were getting closer. Our job is to protect this remaining village. The strategy was carefully planned by the Soviet forces to face the German army's tanks. Every detail was taken into account, because the Soviet forces did not want to suffer another defeat. Each soldier prepared themselves, working together to prepare ammunition. German soldiers were spotted entering the area. Commander Klaus Jaeger monitored the area with binoculars. He was eager to take control of Moscow. Klaus Jaeger was suspicious as to why there was not a single person in sight and no dogs barking. The Red Army troops were hiding and were difficult to spot with the naked eye. Klaus, who was very suspicious of the situation, tried to look again through the telescope, and finally he saw movement in the hay barn. He quickly ordered his men to remove the ammunition from the tank. It turned out that what Klaus had bombed was a trap set by the Red Army. This meant that Klaus had fallen into a trap. Now it's time for Nikolai Ivushkin's tank to fire its shell, after various calculations and measurements of the target so that the shot can kill and destroy a large number of enemies. Accurate and deadly, that's the description of his calculations. The members of Nikolai's team were very happy to be able to destroy 2 tanks at once with a single shell. Knowing his tank was destroyed, Klaus searched for the direction of the bullet in the surrounding area. And it turned out that the bullet came from a pile of hay. Without thinking twice, Klaus immediately launched a counterattack. Nikolai's tank, which was under relentless attack, tried to hide. However, the Germans, assisted by infantry troops, launched mortars from a distance, hitting the settlement recognized as a hiding place. Long story short, after a fierce battle, Nikolai's Red Army lost one of its members, and the Germans only had Klaus left. The battle between Nikolai and Klaus ended in a draw. No one won this battle. They both lay on the ground, unconscious. Nikolai was arrested and caused a commotion when he first arrived. The changes to his face made him unrecognizable. He was put in a special room and tortured and interrogated until he revealed his name and rank. Nikolai finally gave up and told the truth when the female interpreter brought by the Germans was about to be shot by Klaus. Then Klaus left the room. Moving on to the Nazi prison, Klaus asked Nikolai to find a crew to fight against Klaus's tank forces. Nikolai managed to gather his men. They were members of his former tank crew, who had helped destroy the German tank. He then told the female interpreter to report to Klaus that they were ready. Then Nikolai went to the tank repair center and warehouse. There, Klaus asked him to repair a tank, inside of which were many corpses. However, while cleaning the bodies, Nikolai found live ammunition. Then he thought, how can this ammunition be removed? Then he came up with the idea of putting the ammunition inside the bodies and burying them properly. That was how Nikolai tricked Klaus so he could keep the remaining tank ammunition and supplies to escape. Day turned to night. Klaus Jaeger kindly invited Nikolai and the female interpreter to his room. Klaus asked, in the past, how did you devise your strategy to defeat my tanks? Klaus said to Nikolai. It turned out that Nikolai was invited only to discuss his previous defeat. Then they made a toast. The tank repairs are complete. Now Klaus and the soldiers are ready to test themselves against Nikolai. Meanwhile, Nikolai, who has already prepared his ammunition, leads his comrades. He gives his crew moral strength to make the most of this opportunity. Because this chance to escape is also a mission of revenge. The battle began. The German troops prepared themselves. Commander Klaus and his fellow officers simply monitored the situation from an observation tower. Meanwhile, Nikolai's team carried out their duties according to the planned strategy. Klaus was surprised when suddenly a shot was fired at his tank, burning it to ashes. After destroying one German tank, Nikolai's team targeted the tower where Klaus and the German Nazi command were monitoring them. Klaus contacted all tank divisions to be on standby and fire if Red Army troops were spotted. With high accuracy, Nikolai immediately hit the tower with precision. High precision. Merciless. However, Klaus managed to escape. As planned, Nikolai, who had destroyed the watchtower, moved toward the exit. Regardless of any obstacles, the Red Army team continued to advance, hitting German luxury cars. Klaus, who escaped the tank attack, tried to chase the tank and shoot at it. The pursuit was futile, nearly an outburst of emotion. Klaus contacted the emergency command center. Nikolai was pursued with swift action. All German forces were mobilized. Wessel and the outpost also reported, ensuring that everyone had received orders from Klaus, and the siege began. That day arrived without warning. Nikolai and his team headed for the city. When the engine was started, the tank's tracks began to move. Suddenly, a bullet flew by, and Nikolai was lucky to have noticed it first. Meanwhile, Klaus, who was in an airplane, searched for Klaus. He scanned every corner of the forest carefully. Even as the fuel was running out, Klaus insisted the pilot keep flying. Klaus asked the plane to fly lower so the tank's movements would be more visible. And indeed, within a few meters, Klaus found tank tracks. The tracks led to a city. Klaus then returned to base and reported to the entire team to surround the area. Klaus Jaeger did not remain idle. He led the pursuit. After learning Nikolai's destination, Klaus positioned several of his soldiers at various points to stop Nikolai. Knowing he would pass by, Klaus was already monitoring the situation. Without delay, tank shells were fired. Once again, Nikolai accurately assessed the situation. He managed to evade and took up a counter-attacking position. Nikolai fired precise shots with his team. They executed a maneuver that was incredibly cool and only possible for highly skilled and trained individuals. The bullets entered from beneath the German tank and ricocheted upward, then penetrated and exploded the core of the weapon. Long story short, Klaus, who lost one of his tanks, tried to retaliate. With his strategy, Klaus managed to stop Nikolai's advance, and an unstoppable one-on-one tank duel ensued. However, Klaus suffered another defeat. The battle on the big bridge. Here, Klaus, who brought his own tank, fought against Nikolai's tank. Nikolai's team was undaunted and continued to advance even though one of its members was bleeding profusely. They strategized against each other, one-on-one. Bullets flew and exploded. It was truly a battle of life and death. Nikolai's strategy is very clever. He knows that his ammunition is limited and that his bullets cannot penetrate Klaus's tank. So he plans to use the first bullet to close the distance with Klaus, while turning the tank to the right. Then he advances. Hitting Klaus's tank with his tank is his last resort because there is no other choice. After dodging Klaus's second shot, Nikolai got closer and was able to ram Klaus's tank. The collision occurred. Klaus was unable to dodge, and he was pushed to the edge of the cliff. Then Nikolai got out of the tank and pointed his gun at Klaus, who was also lying on the ground. Klaus extends his hand and asks Nikolai to shake hands. This is Klaus's admission of defeat. And a few seconds later, Klaus falls along with his massive tank. Nikolai and the surviving team leave the battle area and meet the female translator. And the film ends. War does not end when the engine stops. It ends when the last memory fades. T34 is not just a story about a tank. It is a story about courage trapped inside steel, about men who refused to surrender, even when the world collapsed around them. In the silence after the battle, we're left with one question. What would you do when escape is your only hope? If you felt the fear, if you felt the rage, if this story stayed with you even after the screen went dark, then you already understand why these stories must be told. Subscribe to ESKC Movie 111, where war is not glorified, but remembered. More dark, emotional, and unforgettable war stories are waiting. Stay with us, because some battles should never be forgotten.